Hi, yeah, I'm Sabrina Castiglione. I am the COO at Pento. So Pento, we are a modern technology company and we are changing the way that payroll works. I'm a massive fantasy geek, so I actually have a small sword collection from my Lord of the Rings replica collecting days. So at the moment I'm at Pento, where I've been here for 6 months as COO. Before this, I was at a cybersecurity startup called Tessian for 5.5 years. And I actually joined Tessian back in the really early days as chief of staff back when they were 7 people. But that was in a really great grounding in kind of operations, kind of in the sense that it's commonly used in startups. And then over time, the role became more focused on driving the financial story of the company. And so that's kind of how it sort of evolved into CFO. One of the reasons I made the move to Pento, on this journey to COO, is, as a payroll software company, our buyers are finance and people. And those are two functions where that I've run before, that I continue to run here at Pento. So it opens up that new angle to me of actually being able to input into the product side of things as well. Whereas at Tessian, cybersecurity is wonderful, but not an area that is my area of expertise. So yeah, that's kind of the evolution of the journey to COO. It actually kind of depends on sort of the day of the week. I try to get most of my functional meetings in, across like a couple of days. So I have a few days to focus more on project work. But I would say that the general themes, apart from, there is the functional management element to the role. I still look after the G&A functions here. So there are just things that come up as part of that. But I try to spend most of my time on the really kind of broader cross-company alignment. I really see our leadership team as my first team rather than any of my functional teams. So it's working with that team on whatever the next biggest challenge is for us as a business. And this typically falls into sort of 2 buckets of either gaining clarity, who we are, either culturally as a business or where we want to play, how we want to win, getting everyone speaking the same language on that part, or helping people figure out how to successfully execute on the vision that they have. For people who've been in a startup at the super early stages, say 20, 25 people and below, at that stage of a company, everyone can have all of the knowledge, complete context sharing, complete knowledge sharing. You don't have to be super intentional about communications. A lot of it comes really naturally. And then there's really a shift. And I think by the time you get to kind of 50 people, maybe even earlier at like 40 people, suddenly that doesn't work anymore, because otherwise you're just telling everyone everything every minute of the day and nothing at all gets done. And it's often at that point in time that the common complaints that companies get is like, it's become a lot more corporate, I'm left out of things, I used to know what's going on, direction isn't clear, the idea of management as like this separate other kind of entity kind of really comes up. And I think it's one of the hardest challenges for a really excellent early team to overcome. And I think that's one of the biggest shifts kind of growing into the COO role. And one of the most important things is that you have to be willing to kind of run towards conflict and embrace it and find how to make healthy, productive conflict a part of your culture in order for your business to succeed. It's one of those roles where someone can be a really successful COO in one environment and a really unsuccessful COO in another. And I think probably the main kind of common thread that I would pull out is being able to like ask the right questions. And like, if I had to say like what even is the right question, I think the biggest question to always be asking is, what is the problem that we're trying to solve? Like, constantly challenging yourself. Is yesterday's problem still today's problem? Are we all talking about the same thing? Why do we think this is a problem? How do we solve it? You need to be able to leverage the learnings from best practices, but also acknowledge that perhaps they're best practices for a different industry or for companies that are much more mature than your own. So having really strong first principles and questioning skills and being able to logically rationalize if this, then that, and take things through those logical steps, it's probably the most valuable, versatile skill set, I would say. In an increasingly media-heavy age, I think the CEO really becomes the external face of the company, and the COO really has to be the internal facing kind of leader of the company, you know, the person kind of really being the glue and making sure that all the puzzle pieces really fit together. And that as knowledge work becomes, I think, more common than like manual work generally. Definitely biased because I'm in tech, but I think generally there's a lot of automation in a lot of industries that shifts more and more people towards knowledge work, and away from kind of more manual and vocational work. I think the job of a COO then becomes less about, you know, managing processes and more around managing people. And that's a slightly different game, right? Because processes and machines and things like that is about, you know, driving efficiency, really codifying things in a clear way, whereas managing people is about influence. So I think to the degree that there's, you know, a shift in the trajectory of COOs, I think they have to be higher EQ. I think they have to be more psychologically aware and just really conscious of social network effects. And I don't just mean like social networks in social media, I mean like the social networks between departments in a company, much more than they used to in the past, and I think we'll need much more of that in the future. As a COO, you are the expert of almost nothing that you get involved in. So, you know, really kind of developing that first principles thinking is great. And the best way to do that is to throw yourselves at hard, dirty work. You know, I remember kind of in the early days as a chief of staff, some of the most valuable things were just throwing myself into things that I had no prior knowledge about, that were messy, that were admin intensive. And the key thing there is just not to accept the messy admin manual work, but to fight it every step of the way, to figure out how to understand it and where the opportunities are for automation. So yeah, I would just say, you know, go find the hardest problems rather than the easiest ones in the company. And they might not be hard, intellectually hard, they might just be labor intensive hard. Throw yourself at that kind of problem, figure out how to solve it. I think it's, you know, one of the most helpful muscles to build.